Welcome to today's Read Aloud. So, for those of you that missed our reading last week, I'll give you a quick fill in on what's been going on in our book. So, they found the picture in Vermont, and then there was a clue, and the clue led them to the hotel where Uncle Frank lived, and they were able to find information on Uncle Frank's girlfriend. So, that's where their lead is heading, or it's taking them next. So they stole an ATV and they're riding along, and they came to an edge of a cliff on the mountains, and we just found them toppling over the side of the cliff. So we'll see what's happening. But surprise, today I have a guest reader for you. So she is going to read our next chapter for us. Okay?
Hi, everybody. Since I can't come to school, I figured this is the next best thing, and I could read a chapter for you. I've been doing a lot of reading because I've been pretty bored at home. I don't like to clean, so I'd rather read instead. So here we go with chapter 4. Aiden let go of the handhold, digging in his heels in an attempt to control his descent. The plan succeeded too well. He jolted to a sudden stop and somersaulted over. All at once he was rolling. The world around him became a twirling blur of stone and sky, but he did manage to catch sight of his tumbling sister 20 feet ahead of him. Meg! He could not tell if the careening ATV had hit her, only that it was past her now, bashing itself to pieces as it caromed down. He barely noticed his own jolts and scrapes as the uneven rock surface brutalized him. His sister was all that mattered. Then he was in the brush, brambles and twigs grazing his skin. The vegetation slowed him to the point where he could clamp his hands around the trunk of a juniper tree. He hauled himself to his feet, scanning the scrub for Meg. She lay at the bottom of a small hollow, just a few feet away from the wreckage of the ATV. She wasn't moving. Careful not to lose his balance again, he sidestepped down the grade to her. His dread easily overpowered any pain he might be feeling from his trip down the mountain. This predicament, their parents in jail, he and Meg running for their lives. The one thing that made it even remotely bearable was the fact that Aiden and Meg were together. There was a faint groan, and Meg turned her scratched and dirty face up to him. I'm always waiting around for you, she complained. You're slowing me down, bro. Are you okay? Barely. She struggled unsteadily to her feet. That tin plated piece of junk missed me by like 3 inches. I could be a smudge on that rock up there. Can you walk? Aiden asked, because I don't think there's another way out of here. His sister took 2 experimental steps. Maybe we should head for those ski condos. We're both in need of repairs. Aiden looked at the remains of the ATV. Talk about repairs. We've had to steal stuff before, but this is the first time we've totaled anything. Somebody's out one quad. We can't think about that, Meg reminded him. Well, what am I supposed to think about? Think about helping mom and dad, she suggested. Think about Jane McIntosh. Think about getting to Boston. They trudged across the rocky ground in the direction of the neighborhood they had seen from the ridge. It felt good to be moving again, despite the aches and stings of their injuries. They made their way in silence for a while, and then Meg asked, Where do you think we are? It was a good question. Back in Colchester, the whole world was looking for them. The police had put out an APB. The search was probably doubled now after the near miss at the Red Jacket Motor Lodge. Had they put enough distance between themselves and that heavy heat? Could they talk to people and ask directions without worrying they might be recognized? All good questions, huh? We probably made it 50 miles or more, he estimated, but Vermont's pretty small. We should avoid the locals if we can, at least until we get out of the state. They crested a small rise and gazed over the neighborhood of ski chalets. An ancient rusted pickup truck that was once blue rattled on down the road below. The spry old fellow who jumped out was at least 60 years older than the truck and plainly agitated. I can't believe you two are walking. I've never seen such a fall in all my born days. Are you all right? Oh, it looked worse than it was, Meg said, hoping there wasn't too much visible blood running from many of her cuts. We're totally fine, Aiden added. Thanks anyway. The man shook his head in disgust. What were your parents thinking, letting you ride off on that newfangled buzz bomb? The falconers exchanged a look. What was probably going through their parents' mind at this moment was a combination of how did this happen to us and how are we going to survive? What else was there to think about in prison anyway? Don't worry about us, Meg said. We can walk home from here. Walk? Nothing. I'm taking you to the hospital. But we're okay. Just a few bumps, and the doctor can send you home. Get in the truck now. They hesitated. Should we run? Whispered Meg. Aiden shook his head. No, then he might call the cops. But what if someone at the hospital recognizes us? Take it easy. We walk inside, he drives away, we walk back out again. They piled in and the truck backfired to life. Their chauffeur proceeded down the road at 8 miles an hour, staring through his cracked windshield with dogged determination. The silence was uncomfortable. Aiden felt he had to say something. I hope we're not taking you too far out of your way, sir. It opened up the floodgates. I had to go into town anyway. The Andersons need a new ball cock for their toilet. I'm the handyman hereabouts. The only one, as a matter of fact. Lester McCure's the name. That's like Mercury with an E instead of a Y. French, you know. By the time they pulled up in front of the small medical center in the town of St. Johnsbury, the Falconers knew much of Lester Mercure's life story, plus much of his private business of the city slickers who owned the ski condos in the area. Aiden opened the passenger door. Well, thanks for the ride. We owe you one. The handyman got out of the truck. I'm coming in there with you. But what about the Andersons' toilet? Blurted Meg. I saw what happened. The doctor might need to talk to me. Aiden and Meg had no choice but to allow themselves to be escorted inside to the check-in desk. Aiden gave his name as Gary Donovan, one of his fellow inmates at Sunnydale Farm, the juvenile detention facility he and his sister had escaped from. Meg used another Sunnydale identity, Belinda Gustafson, the toughest, meanest girl in the dorm. It made sense to pretend they were unrelated. The police would be looking for a brother and sister. And then Lester put his 2 cents in. I saw the whole thing, he told the nurse. They were riding on this mechanized whatchamacallit when it tipped over and threw them off the ridge. Darn near scared me to death. I thought I'd be cleaning up the bodies. They took 2 seats in the waiting room among a few other patients. To their dismay, Lester came with them. Meg cast Aiden an agonized look. How would they ever get out of this place under the watchful eye of this well-meaning old bore? They waited until Aiden thought he would go insane. Somewhere in this town, buses were departing for Boston, home of Jane McIntosh, who might know where to find Frank Lindenauer. A bus might be leaving at that very moment. And what are we doing? Sitting in a hospital with Lester McCure with an E, not a Y. A police officer came into emergency and Aiden nearly jumped out of his skin. Calm down. He's just filing a report on some car accident. He isn't looking for fugitives. At long last, a nurse called for Donovan and Gustafson. Lester accompanied them to the open door. Are you family? The nurse asked. No, but I witnessed the accident firsthand. Darndest thing I ever saw. They were riding a mountain on some kind of cockamamie doom buggy. Why don't you just wait in the lounge where you'll be more comfortable? Aiden and Meg were pathetically grateful. The nurse escorted them to 2 separate exam rooms and told them the doctor would be right in. Aiden waited a few seconds for her to walk away before running next door. Meg had the same idea, and they collided in the hall. Let's blow this pop stand, urged Meg. Right. They couldn't leave through the waiting room. Lester would be sitting right there. So they walked briskly down the brightly lit corridor, sala- slaloming around medical center employees and rolling equipment carts. Luckily, the place was busy, and the doctors and nurses who rushed to and fro had little time to think about a couple of kids. All at once, Meg let out a little gasp and stopped short. Aiden followed the twitch of her gesturing elbow. In the center of a bulletin board, plastered with hospital announcements, was tacked a blotchy fax with two small photographs. Aiden recognized the murky images immediately. It was their mugshots from Sunnydale. Oh boy, this is pretty good, and I don't even know the whole story, but I love it. Thanks for letting me join you guys and read. I'll be anxious to see how it goes.
See you guys.